Guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Molly Zemek. And she helps entrepreneurs, individuals become empowered and to live your best life. She's got a fantastic story about hardships, setbacks, resilience, and how she helps clients. She's also a podcast host of Weight Loss for Food Lovers. And I'm really excited to delve into the conversation. So, Molly, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I know, and I'm really excited to, showcase you on the podcast. So talk about your journey and your story and how you came to do what you're doing.
I am a lifelong food lover. I grew up in a family of foodies, and my father is Italian and just really shared his love of food with me. I just really enjoyed the pleasure in eating from a young age, so much so that I ended up leaving graduate school as an adult and enrolling in culinary school, becoming a trained chef, and then working in the restaurant business before eventually leaving that line of work to start my own family. But struggled off and on with just balancing my passion for eating and also drinking, with really feeling and looking my best. And it was around, when I turned 40 that I reached this point of just noticing, yeah, just like how physically unwell I felt as the result of some of these mindless habits with eating and drinking. But I also was really only familiar with dieting as a way to kind of offset those habits, but dieting just didn't really work for me long term. And as I got older, it was just no longer really a sustainable solution. And so it was around that time that I was introduced to life coaching and started to just ask myself some deeper questions around the role that food was playing in my life, the role that the drinking wine was playing, and started this process of just becoming a lot more conscious in my eating and drinking habits. I ended up losing 45 pounds. I ended up quitting drinking. And because life coaching was such just a valuable tool for me, I started my own business called Weight Loss for Food Lovers, where I began just teaching other people like me who love to eat and who enjoy drinking wine ways to have a different relationship with those things so that they can actually optimize their health without necessarily going through a traditional diet or detox program, but learning how to just have a more mindful relationship so that they can sort of savor the pleasure in eating and drinking, but doing it with less. And then just feeling so much better and discovering the pleasure to be had in your own body. So that's kind of a little bit of my backstory and why I started my business about 5 years ago. And then I also wrote a book, which is coming out. I mean, it will actually be out at the time of this podcast being released, called Decoding Your Emotional Appetite: A Food Lover's Guide for Weight Loss, where I tell my story and also the story of a lot of my clients and a lot of just the methodology that I teach inside of my program.
Yeah, really interesting story. And so we'll kind of dive into it. So one thing that is interesting that I hear quite often is this idea of your relationship with food. And it kind of reminds me of like your relationship with money, or relationship with the your members of the opposite sex. So talk about, I mean, what is a healthy relationship with food mean? What does it look like? What does it feel like? What are the thoughts going in your head? I'm just for my own curiosity.
Well, that's a great question. And I like to use the word relationship because so many of us turn to food for reasons other than physical nourishment. And that's a big part of what my book is about, is really distinguishing between your physical appetite, like the literal signs of hunger and satiety, versus all the other reasons we eat when we're not hungry or when we're past our ideal satiety point. And so an ideal relationship with food is really individual. So I'm not somebody to say, oh, your ideal relationship with food looks like this, or everybody's ideal relationship with food should look like that, which is often what dieting does for us. It tends to kind of impose certain rules that food should be this or that, or you shouldn't drink at all, or you should only have this amount of drinks. The ideal relationship, I think, is one where you can still really enjoy the pleasure in eating, but also really optimize the pleasure in your body so that you are eating in a way that helps you feel your best without sacrificing the pleasure in food. I think that many of us struggle with dieting as a way to offset overeating because it teaches us that there are certain foods that are good or bad. That's not true, right? Food is neutral, it's just food. And I think sometimes thinking about food as good or bad actually undermines our relationship with food, right? It actually makes it feel like a forbidden fruit. So I think for me, the ideal relationship with food is like feeling completely free to be able to eat whatever I want to, but actually to desire feeling good more than wanting to eat as much as possible. So really feeling free to just like know the ideal amount of food that I can eat while still maximizing the pleasure that I feel in my body.
Mm. Yeah, it's quite interesting. And then recently I've been trying to explore just like, your relationship with money and how that causes problems. And then the other thing, I was talking with another individual, and he was saying that, during like breakfast or noontime, typically we sit in front of the TV or something or have, something going on. But he said just sit there and kind of for example, if you're having toast and jam, do it slowly, intentionally. How does it make you feel? What are you thinking? And so, which brings me to my question: how do you incorporate mindfulness into eating habits, and what does that mean, and how is that health? Practical tips for people looking to eat more mindfully and healthfully.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the first thing that I recommend is just to start being mindful about what your body is telling you. So many of us eat when we're not even hungry. Your body's not even asking for food. And the way to, I think, be even more satisfied with eating is by allowing yourself to be a little hungry first. So that could be the first point of mindfulness is noticing, like, am I physically hungry? Are there true signs of physical hunger? If so, yeah, it's time to eat. And then notice how much more satisfying it is to eat from a place of hunger because you can also more easily detect your ideal satiety point, which I think is not when you're overly full and you feel uncomfortable, but when you feel nourished while still, having that sense of calm and lightness in your body so that you're not bogged down and overtaxing your digestion, but just eating enough, feeling light, feeling energized, and noticing what that feels like. That's another point of mindfulness. And one of the ways that you figure out, like, what is the ideal amount? When is my ideal stopping point? Is by eating slowly, like you described with the jam and toast, paying full attention to the flavor of food, engaging all five of your senses so that you're not distracted by what's on TV or what's on your phone, but that you're noticing the flavor in each bite and
Yeah.
then noticing what's happening to your hunger while you're eating so that you're realizing, like, oh, actually, I'm getting the signal that this is just enough and this is the perfect stopping point. So, those are some of the basics of mindful eating and not always as easily implemented as I'm making it sound. But I think just by practicing bringing your attention back to your body instead of focusing just on the food, you can just start to notice a lot of the wisdom that your body already has and some signals that it's giving you every single day that you might have been ignoring.
And I'm actually playing devil's advocate because, some of the audience out there, they're like, yeah, what's wrong with watching, a favorite show while we're eating? Like why is that bad? Or what, why do I, you know, kind of talk about like, why is what, I mean, I would hate to label bad, but, why is it better to kind of listen to your body versus is this like another form of just meditation or is it just kind of another thing?
I don't think it is bad. I mean, I think that if you decide that, eating while you're watching TV is advantageous for you, that you enjoy it, that it's a form of entertainment, and there's no negative consequences, keep doing it. But this is for people who are at this place where they've just noticed that they're in this habit of mindless eating throughout the day, and their body is starting to respond in a negative way to that.
Mm, mm.
So for some people, it's a non-issue. It's like, yeah, I'm like, I feel great. I'm not really having any negative feedback from my body. I'm not overweight, or I'm not like struggling with mobility, or I'm not having digestive issues. But for people who have gotten to this point where it's like they're using food as a way to entertain themselves all the time, but then they're physically feeling worse and they're noticing that it's affecting their health, it's affecting their mental health, their emotional well-being. The way that you get more in touch with your body to really discern like what your body needs is by putting away the distractions, even if it's just temporarily, so
Yeah.
that you start to just recognize, oh, okay, like this is actually a more appropriate amount of food for me. If I want to feel lighter, if I want to be leaner, if I want to be more energized, if I want to sleep better, if I want to have, better moods, I
Mhm.
need to kind of tap into that wisdom that my body's telling me. But that wisdom is so subtle that if you're distracted by TV and all these other things, you won't always hear it. And
Yeah.
if you're in the habit of always eating and never allowing yourself to be hungry, then you're completely dismissing the cues that your body's telling you. So,
Uh-huh.
eating as a form of entertainment, I don't think it's bad. I think it's something that a lot of us do. And I think it's something that you can continue doing if you want to.
Mhm.
But if you're somebody who's recognizing that something needs to change with your health and that dieting just doesn't seem to work for you because it doesn't feel natural and you feel like you have to give up the food that you love,
Yeah.
being more mindful in the way that I described with fewer distractions is a way that you can develop the skill of knowing really, okay, what's the ideal kind of food? What's the ideal amount? And how can I really actually experience more pleasure in eating by being less distracted?
Interesting. Which kind of, while you were talking, it was like, it kind of reminds me of like, for example, if you were intentional or you just kind of, sit with your body and see how it feels and the different sensations is very similar to like, you going out to eat with your friends, kind of it's like a social, norm and social custom, we eat to bond together and it's kind of like family, Thanksgiving, Christmas, all of that. Um, you also talked about this idea of hunger and more recently I've been talking to a lot of individuals and they're saying like they're incorporating like 1 day fast or skipping a meal or this intermittent fasting and how that helps your body and I'm not sure if you can elaborate on that or give your thoughts.
I think fasting could be an important tool for some people. Fasting works well as far as regulating your insulin levels. So, insulin is one of the primary hunger hormones that is responsible for either storing fat or burning fat. And when we are overweight or needing to burn some fat, we want our insulin levels to be as low as possible. And that happens through fasting.
Uh-huh.
Fasting is also a really useful tool for getting to know hunger. So, for people who might have unconscious fear around being hungry or are not used to dealing with hunger because they have a sense of panic or urgency when they get hungry, I oftentimes will have some of my clients do not necessarily a 24-hour fast, but just an extended fast in the morning so that they start to recognize that hunger is really not a problem. And when you're eating whole foods, it can be very mild and it comes in waves and it will also appear and then pretty quickly disappear as your body transitions into burning fat. I think one of the useful things about being in a fasted state is that your body becomes better at burning fat versus burning sugar, which is what happens when we're constantly eating and insulin levels are spiked and we're processing glucose. And so if we can get our bodies to be better at burning fat by lowering our insulin through fasting, then our bodies can just be can sort of transition into that fat burning phase more readily during the day. But I also think that there's an argument to be made just by creating more space in between your meals. So if somebody doesn't want to have to do a 24-hour fast or even a longer fast in the morning, then just allow yourself to get hungry in between meals. Like that's enough of a fasting period to have your insulin level low and your body actually kind of burning fat when food is not readily coming in. And so that could be a good way to just sort of dip a toe into the water of fasting without feeling like, okay, now I've got to go from like eating 6 meals a day to like fasting for 24 hours. Like that feels really difficult. It's like,
Yeah.
what if I just allowed myself to get hungry before my next meal?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I know, I've been, it's just experimenting and just we're just eating like 60% full and kind of there's all these different things you can do. You don't have to. I know one guy I was talking to, he's like, I recommend 48-hour fast, and I'm like, well, most people can't do that, So the other question is this role of alcohol in our social settings, and it's kind of a custom, but talk about your decision and how you view the role and its impact on lifestyle and health.
Oh yeah. Well, I used to be a big wine lover. I think part of just my training as a chef and the fine dining experience was an appreciation of wine. And I also grew up, in a family of wine lovers, and my Italian relatives would make wine in their basement, and my parents enjoyed wine every night. That was a big part of my life up until my 40s. And I just recognized again at that point, as I started to change some of my habits with eating, that alcohol, really took its toll on my physical health and my mental health. And I never considered myself an alcoholic. I was maybe drinking like 2 or 3 glasses of wine a night. And I was also a certified sommelier, by the way. So I went to school to be trained as a wine professional. But I just was, hearing more and more from my body that wine was not helping me feel my best. It was disrupting my sleep. It was leading to more urges to eat. I would feel irritable. I developed anxiety. And so I recognized that as a really important piece of the puzzle in terms of optimizing my health. And through the process of mindfulness and coaching and using some of the tools that I teach in my program, I very gradually cut back on how much I was drinking. And the more I did that, the more I recognized just like how much better I could feel without drinking. So I
Yeah.
started to replace the desire for alcohol with the desire to really feel good. And so now I don't drink at all. And that was never my intention to give up alcohol. But when I just started to feel better and better and just discovered that I could actually be at optimal health in my late 40s if I
Mm.
wasn't drinking at all, it just made the decision pretty easy. So that's a big part of what I help people with now. There are so many people who struggle with wanting to drink less, but having a hard time, identifying as somebody who either doesn't drink or who drinks less, and figuring out how to navigate social situations. So what I often tell people is like, you don't have to just go from drinking every day to giving it up altogether. That can actually feel very daunting. But
Mhm.
you can learn how to have a more conscious relationship with alcohol, just like you can with food, where you're more deliberate in how much you're drinking. You're doing it in a way that stays where you're staying connected to your body. And you're recognizing that you can be a lot more in control so that you can drink less without giving it up. And actually, through that process, just notice how much better you can feel physically as you do it.
Yeah, I love that. And really fascinating conversation. And I know a lot of the audience may be interested in contacting you, learning more about, how you can view your relationships, So how can people follow you and reach out to you? I know you also mentioned you had a book as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So, my website, mollyzemek.com, is a great place to head to. There's information about my book, there's information about my membership program, and then my podcast, which is called Weight Loss for Food Lovers, would be another free resource for people to check out.
Nice. Yeah, and for all the audience out there, let's thank Molly for coming on and give her socials a like and follow, and all of her resources will be in links. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you so much.